Hello everyone, and welcome back to Terrifying Bedtime Tales. I know many of them use these videos to fall asleep. Before you drift off, I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video. It had been a quiet night in the O'Connor house until the knock came. 3 sharp raps on the door at exactly midnight, as it always did. But this time, the air felt heavier, charged with a sense of something that wasn't right. Clara O'Connor had learned to ignore the knocks over the past few months. After all, it was probably just the wind. But tonight, as she stood before the door, a chill ran down her spine. The house felt too still, too empty. The door seemed to pulse with an energy of its own, as if something or someone on the other side was waiting. When she opened it, she found no one there. But in the darkness beyond, there was something else. A whisper, soft but unmistakable. "I've come for you, Thomas." Clara turned to her husband, Thomas, standing behind her. His face drained of color, eyes wide with fear, and in that moment she realized the knocks weren't just a nuisance, they were a warning. And the debt had finally come due. The night was thick and still in the small town of Grayfield. The old house sat atop a hill, its stone walls and ivy-clad windows casting a shadow that seemed to swallow the moonlight. Inside, the O'Connor family had just finished their dinner. The fire crackled lazily in the hearth, sending flickers of light that danced on the walls. Clara O'Connor, a mother of 3, wiped her hands on her apron, smiling at her husband Thomas as he passed her a cup of tea. "Do you think it'll snow tonight?" she asked, looking out the window at the empty road. Thomas, who had been checking over his work for the day, didn't seem to hear her. He was too distracted, as he often was in the winter months. I don't know. Looks like it might." Clara sighed and turned back to the stove. Her youngest, Lucy, was playing with her dolls on the rug, while Ethan and Sarah, the older children, were on the porch talking about school. All was calm, quiet, until the clock struck 11 p.m. It was always just after the clock struck the hour when it happened. The knock came at the door. It wasn't the first time, not for the O'Connors. For the past few months, every night around this time, they would hear a knock on the front door. Always 3 knocks, followed by silence. No one ever spoke, and when they opened the door, no one was there. The family had tried to ignore it, thinking it was just a trick of the wind or the house settling. But tonight, something felt different. Clara felt her chest tighten as the knock echoed through the house. "Thomas," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "Did you hear that?" He frowned, standing up. "It's just the wind. I'm sure of it." But Clara wasn't so sure. The hair on the back of her neck stood on end. Lucy, still on the rug, looked up with wide eyes, her tiny face pale in the firelight. "Mommy, who's knocking?" she asked softly. Clara gave her a nervous smile. "It's nothing, sweetie. Go back to playing." But Lucy didn't move. She stared toward the front door, as if she could see something standing just beyond the threshold. "Who's there?" Sarah's voice was sharp from the porch. She had heard the knock, too, and had run inside. "There's no one out there. It's just an animal or something." Ethan came in behind her, looking confused. "I didn't see anything." Thomas was already walking toward the door. He stopped briefly at the window beside it, peering out into the dark. "Nothing," he muttered, his breath fogging up the glass. "Just the wind, like I said." Clara still felt uneasy. She had never been superstitious, but there was something unsettling about the knocks. It wasn't normal. Thomas slowly turned the door handle and opened it. The cold air rushed in, and for a moment, the family stood in silence. There was no one there, no person, no animal, just the wind whistling through the trees and the soft crunch of snow beneath the porch. The world outside was still and empty, just like it always was at night in Grayfield. Clara closed her eyes, relieved for a brief moment. But just as Thomas was about to shut the door, a cold breeze swept in from the darkness, making the flames in the hearth flicker. That was when they heard it. A voice, soft, hushed, almost a whisper. "I've come for you, Thomas." Clara's heart skipped a beat. She grabbed Thomas's arm, pulling him back inside. "Close the door quickly." Thomas didn't move at first, his eyes fixed on the darkness outside. "Who's there?" he called, his voice more demanding than before. Nothing but silence answered him. Clara could feel her heart pounding in her chest, her fingers clenched tight around the doorframe. "Please, Thomas, let's just lock the door. Whatever it is, it's not worth it." But Thomas stood rooted to the spot, staring into the night. He stepped outside onto the porch, his footsteps muffled by the growing snow. "Hello," he called again, more firmly now. "Who's there?" A figure stepped into the light. It was tall, cloaked in shadow, its face obscured by the hood of a long, dark coat. For a moment, Clara thought she could see eyes, dark, black, unblinking, staring right at her husband. But then the figure moved forward, stepping out of the shadows, and she saw it was nothing but empty space beneath the hood. She gasped, "Thomas, don't go any closer." But Thomas didn't seem to hear her. He took another step forward, as if drawn to the figure. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice steady now, but Clara could hear the faint tremor beneath it. The figure didn't respond. It took another step closer. Clara could hear Lucy crying behind her, and Sarah rushed to her side, pulling her away from the door. "What's going on, Mom?" Sarah whispered, her face pale. "Who is that?" Clara could barely speak, her breath caught in her throat. I don't know." "Who are you?" Thomas asked again, his voice demanding. "What do you want?" The figure stopped just in front of him, and for the first time, it spoke in a voice that was cold and deep, as if it came from somewhere far away. "I've come to take what was promised." Clara's blood ran cold. She didn't understand. What was this thing? What did it want from them? From Thomas? Her husband stood motionless, his face pale, his eyes locked on the dark, empty face beneath the hood. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice trembling now. The figure took another step forward, and this time Clara saw it. There, just beneath the shadow of the hood, a faint glow, almost imperceptible, came from the figure's eyes. It wasn't light, nor was it warmth. It was darkness, cold. And in that instant, Clara understood that whatever this thing was, it was not from this world. "Your debt has come due," it said, each word like a cold breath against the night air. Thomas stepped back, his face a mixture of fear and disbelief. "I don't owe you anything." The figure didn't respond. Instead, it tilted its head slowly, as if examining Thomas with an unsettling amount of curiosity. Clara could feel something in the air shift, a heavy, oppressive presence that made it hard to breathe. She wanted to scream, to pull Thomas inside and shut the door, but something was holding her back. She couldn't explain it, but it was like the figure had a grip on her, just as it had on her husband. Suddenly, without warning, the figure lunged forward, its hands outstretched toward Thomas. Clara screamed. But just as quickly as the figure moved, Thomas was pulled backward into her arms. The figure recoiled, its movements almost impossibly fast. "You cannot escape the deal," it hissed. "You cannot run from what is owed." Clara held Thomas tightly, her heart racing in her chest. "What deal? What does it want from us?" The figure paused. Its voice was barely a whisper. "The debt is your own. He knows." Clara looked at Thomas, her eyes searching for an explanation. But his face was ashen, his lips parted in shock, as if he was reliving something from long ago. Thomas choked on his words. "I thought it was over." The figure tilted its head, its empty gaze fixing on Clara. You can never outrun your past. And with that, the figure began to fade into the darkness, its form dissipating like smoke in the cold night air. Clara was left standing on the porch, Thomas in her arms, shaking with terror. What was that? Sarah whispered from the doorway. Thomas didn't respond. He was still staring into the night, lost in the memory of something far older, something that had come to claim him at last. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the knock came again. 3 sharp raps on the door. Clara stood frozen, clutching Thomas, her heart racing. She knew deep down that tonight would not be the last time the visitor came. The debt had been called, and there was no escaping what had been promised. It would come again, and next time it might not be Thomas it sought. The knock echoed again, louder this time, its sharp raps punctuating the cold silence of the night. Clara's heart raced in her chest, her breath coming in shallow, frantic gasps. She could feel Thomas trembling against her, his body stiff and unresponsive, as if he were trapped in a memory that he could not escape. "Don't answer it," Sarah whispered urgently, her eyes wide with fear. She clutched Lucy to her side, trying to shield the little girl from whatever evil had just visited their doorstep. "Please, Mom, don't answer it." But Clara couldn't tear her eyes away from the door. The knock, the same eerie, unmistakable sound, rang out again, and with it, a cold wave of terror washed over her. Something primal, something deeply ancient, told her that they could not avoid what was coming. This was no longer a random occurrence, no longer a mere knock in the night. It was a warning, a summons. Thomas, still paralyzed by what had just happened, finally spoke in a hoarse voice, barely audible. "Clara, you can't open the door. It knows. It knows everything. It's too late." "Too late for what?" Clara asked, her voice tight with panic. She turned to him, trying to make sense of the hollow, empty look in his eyes. There was a deep, overwhelming sorrow there. "What deal? What did you mean when you said it was over? What have you done, Thomas?" For the first time in years, Thomas's face showed signs of genuine regret. His jaw clenched, and he ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "I thought it was done. I thought I could bury it, leave it behind. But some things, they don't stay buried." The knock came again, more insistent now, almost as if it were angry at being ignored. Clara's pulse thundered in her ears, and the walls of the house seemed to close in around her. The wind outside howled like some restless spirit, tugging at the shutters, rattling the windows. With one hand, she held on to Thomas, the other gripped the doorframe, her fingers cold against the wood. It felt like the house itself was alive, groaning in protest. As she stood there, she realized that the darkness outside had deepened, had become even thicker, like ink spilling over the earth. The air felt heavier, charged with something she couldn't see, but could feel in the pit of her stomach. "I have to answer it," Clara whispered, the words barely escaping her lips. "I have to know what it wants." "No," Thomas shouted, his voice rising with an urgency that startled her. He grabbed her wrist, pulling her back. "You can't open that door. Do you hear me? If you do, it will never stop. It will come for all of us. It will take everything." Clara stared at him, a mixture of confusion and terror swirling inside her. "Why, Thomas? Why? What are we supposed to do? How do we stop this?" Thomas looked away, his face pale as the first light of dawn began to creep across the horizon. "I don't know. I don't know if we can. But I'm not going to let it take you. I won't let it take the kids." Clara's heart hammered as she felt the pull of the door, the desire to open it and face whatever lay beyond, whatever had been promised. The weight of the figure's words echoed in her mind. "The debt is your own. He knows." "Thomas," she said slowly, the realization settling like a stone in her chest. This has been going on for a long time, hasn't it? It wasn't just a knock. It's always been waiting for you. Thomas's face crumpled as if he had been punched in the gut. I didn't want this. I didn't think it would come back, but it always does. Clara's mind raced, trying to piece together the broken fragments of what had been left unsaid. The strange happenings in their house, the fleeting whispers, the dark corners of their lives that no one dared to speak about. The debts that weren't just financial. No, these were debts of the soul. The knock came again, louder, more desperate. Clara's hand trembled on the door. She knew deep down that this was no longer a choice. It was the moment everything would change. Whatever dark pact Thomas had made in his past, whatever consequences had followed him here, they were finally catching up to him. Catching up to all of them. Thomas, she said softly, her voice shaking. What did you promise? Thomas bowed his head, tears welling in his eyes. I promised to keep it buried. I thought if I ignored it long enough, it would go away. But it didn't. It never does. It's here now, because it has come to collect. The silence stretched between them, thick with the weight of unspoken truths. Clara's heart ached for him, for the burden he had carried all these years. And yet, there was a fear within her, a fear of what they would face if she opened that door. She could feel the presence outside, growing stronger, pressing against the threshold like a storm. And then, through the silence, a voice called from beyond the door. I've come for you, Thomas. Clara's breath caught in her throat. The voice was clear now, louder, more distinct. And it wasn't just Thomas it spoke to. It was speaking to them, to all of them. She took a deep, shuddering breath. I don't care what you promised. I won't let it take you. Not without a fight. Clara stepped forward, pulling Thomas by the arm. He looked at her, startled by her sudden resolve. What are you doing? I'm opening the door. Clara, no, Thomas pleaded, but his voice was filled with desperation, not the command it once held. He was a man broken by the weight of years spent running from the inevitable. But Clara shook her head. You can't protect us forever, Thomas. Whatever it is, it's already inside. I'm not letting it take us, without a fight. If it wants to claim something, it can start with me. With trembling hands, Clara slowly reached for the door handle. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then, with a swift motion, she swung the door open. Darkness poured into the room like an ocean wave, cold and thick with something unnatural. The figure stood there, its hood still raised, its face hidden in the shadows. But now, Clara saw something more. The air around it shimmered like heat rising from an open flame. The ground beneath her feet seemed to tremble with its presence. It didn't speak. It didn't need to. Clara stepped forward, holding her ground, her heart pounding but resolute. She had no idea how she would fight this thing, how she could possibly stop it. But one thing she knew for certain: she would not let it claim Thomas. Not without a fight. For the first time, Thomas stepped beside her, standing tall. This is where it ends, he whispered, his voice firm. The figure stepped closer, its presence more suffocating with every inch it moved toward them. The cold air that filled the room turned to ice, stinging Clara's skin as if the very atmosphere were being sucked away by the shadow before them. Her breath was shallow, her heart pounding wildly against her ribcage. Yet, in the midst of all this fear, something deep within her stirred, a defiant spark of resolve. This ends tonight, Clara said again, her voice stronger than she felt. Thomas, standing beside her, clenched his fists, his body rigid with both fear and determination. His eyes locked onto the figure, but there was a flicker of something else there. Now regret, sorrow, and a sliver of hope, too. Maybe, just maybe, they could end the cycle, end the debt, end the visitor's claim. the figure halted in front of them, its form more ethereal now than before, like smoke folding into itself. Clara's eyes were drawn to its hollow face, a featureless void that seemed to draw her in with an unnatural pull. The emptiness in the figure's gaze was like staring into the abyss, cold, unknowable, and infinite. "You cannot escape what is owed," the figure's voice boomed, its tone low and foreboding. Clara took a slow step forward, her feet heavy but resolute. "I don't care what you think is owed. Thomas is not yours to take." The figure's empty face seemed to waver as if it were studying her, assessing her resolve. It didn't seem angry, just curious. "You have no idea what you face," it whispered, its voice slithering into her mind. "The debt is ancient. It cannot be undone. There is no escaping it." Clara stood tall, defiance burning in her chest. She reached out, her hand trembling but steady. "I don't care. You're wrong. We are more than the debt you think you can claim. We are more than your shadow, and I won't let it consume us." For a long moment, the figure was silent. Its presence loomed over them like a storm, but Clara could feel something shifting in the air. The temperature dropped, and then there was a crack, a deep, resonating sound like the breaking of ancient stone. Suddenly, the figure recoiled as though struck by an unseen force. The sound grew louder, the cracks reverberating through the house like thunder. Clara stepped back, looking at Thomas. His face was pale, his eyes wide as he stared at the shifting, wraith-like figure. "What's happening?" he whispered, a flicker of confusion and fear crossing his face. "I don't know," Clara murmured, but she could feel it now. The energy in the room, the shift in the air. The figure was fading. The void in its face seemed to splinter, revealing something much darker. It was as if its form was being undone. But then, the figure's voice rose, twisting and writhing like a scream caught in a storm. "You cannot undo what was bound," it shrieked. "You cannot defy the dead." And then, with a final horrible crash, the shadow twisted in on itself, its edges folding into the darkness from which it had emerged. A blast of cold wind swept through the doorway, and the figure was gone. The air became still once more, and the oppressive weight that had hung over the family was lifted, but not entirely. A chill lingered, and Clara could still hear the faint echoes of the figure's voice, ringing in the corners of her mind. She blinked, and in an instant, the room felt normal. The fire crackled in the hearth once more, the wind outside no longer howling, and the house seemed to breathe again. But Clara knew it wasn't over. Not yet. She turned to Thomas, whose face had drained of color. His eyes were wide, filled with both relief and a deep, abiding sadness. "It's gone," he whispered, "but it's not over." Clara took a step toward him, reaching out to him with trembling hands. "What do you mean?" Thomas swallowed hard, his eyes clouded with the weight of years of guilt. "The debt, it's not something you can outrun. The figure wasn't just here for me. It was here for all of us. My past, my mistakes, they were always going to catch up to me. And now it's part of all of us." Clara's heart sank. "What do you mean? Are we cursed? Will it come back?" Thomas shook his head slowly, his gaze dropping to the floor. "I don't know, but I know one thing. It's not about escaping. It's about confronting what we owe, what we've done. I thought I could bury it, but that shadow, it was part of me, and it will always be." Clara stood frozen for a moment, trying to process his words. The weight of everything, of the past, of the deal, of whatever dark pact had tied Thomas to that shadow, pressed down on her. She felt a cold pang in her chest, knowing that whatever had passed that night wasn't the end. It was only a temporary reprieve. "We'll face it together," Clara said softly, her voice steady with resolve. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together." We're stronger than whatever this thing wants us to believe. Thomas nodded slowly, the exhaustion in his eyes heavy but filled with a sliver of hope. He took her hand in his, squeezing it tightly. The weight of the darkness had not fully lifted, but Clara could see that for the first time, Thomas wasn't running from it anymore. In the silence that followed, Clara could feel the presence of the figure in the back of her mind, lingering in the shadows. But this time, it was different. It no longer held the same power over her. The family, though haunted by what had happened, was still standing, still together. And together, they would find a way to break the cycle. No longer would they allow the past to dictate their fate. No longer would they be ruled by a debt that they had never asked for. But Clara knew this was just the beginning. The midnight visitor would come again, in some form, in some way, but next time they would be ready. They would face it head-on as a family, and this time they wouldn't be caught off guard. They would reclaim their lives, and they would never allow the shadow to take them again.